The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening all, my name is Ben Potter and I'm one of the scientific services vets at Royal Canin. Birth and growth has always been a major focus for Royal Canin as they are critical times and determine the health and well-being of cats and dogs throughout their lives. The neonatal period, which we'll be talking about tonight, is a crucial period with many adaptations required from a life from within the uterus to one outside it. The newborn must not only start to oxygenate by itself, but also maintain blood glucose and a stable body temperature. Finally, the immune and digestive systems are still developing. Managing the first few days and weeks of life is vital for survival and the later health of the animal. In this presentation, we'll be discussing the ins and outs of feline neonatology. Tonight, I'll be covering the biology and physiology of neonates, as well as risk factors, lactation and the important role of colostrum, neonatal immunity, and then finally we'll finish on nutritional management. In order to keep the webinar running smoothly, I'll keep my answers to any questions that get raised until the end. You've heard me say neonates, neonatal period, and neonatology, but what exactly am I referring to? More specifically, what is the neonatal period? Is it the first 3 days following birth? From birth until 21 days? From birth until 3 months of age? Or from birth until 4 months of age? Well, for those people that chose B, you are correct. When we refer to the neonatal period, we're referring to the period from birth until day 21. And this is exactly what we'll be discussing tonight. As you're all aware, there are many critical moments in the development of a kitten. Firstly, we have the embryonic phase, which is from day 0 until day 42. This makes up 2/3 of the gestation period. In this time, the cells of the embryo differentiate to form the specialized structures and functions that they will need to have as an adult. They then form nerves, blood cells, skin cells, muscle cells, etc. And these are organized into tissues, the tissues into organs, and organs into bodily systems. Secondly, we have the fetal phase, which is from day 43 until birth. This is the last 1/3 of gestation and is where we see fetal growth and maturation of the tissues and organs. We then have the miracle of birth, which isn't without its potential risks and complications, followed by the neonatal period. When we talk about neonates, we're talking about the period from birth until day 21 of age. During this period, there are some key features which make them vulnerable. Firstly, neonates can't regulate their internal temperature, which may result in them easily becoming hypothermic or having a low body temperature. They have little energy reserves, so regular feeding is key to their survival. They're prone to dehydration, which can become life-threatening. Their digestive tract is not as functional as it is in adults and needs to develop. And they have an immature immune system, which means that they are prone to infection. So let's go into detail about each sensitivity. We know that neonates are extremely sensitive to temperature. The reasons for this include their temperature regulation system is still immature and developing. On top of this, they don't have a shivering reflex. Shivering is used to generate body heat when hypothermia occurs. And they also have a very large surface area, and this means it is much easier for them to lose heat when compared to an older kitten or to an adult cat. If neonates become hypothermic, we know that if their body temperature is less than 34 degrees, they're unable to digest milk, which in turn will result in low blood sugar or hypoglycemia. If their body temperature drops below 32 degrees, they then lose their suckling reflex completely. The values at the bottom here demonstrate that as they continue to develop, their average body temperature increases with age. Another factor we need to take into consideration is the fact that they have a lack of energy reserves, unlike older kittens and adults. What we do know is that they're born with minimal energy reserves, yet have very high energy requirements. They lack normal mechanisms, which helps to regulate blood sugar levels. If they have low blood sugar, it's much harder for them to correct it. They have a much higher energy demand. And over here, we can see the daily, in the table over here, we can see the daily energy requirements based on different life stages. RER stands for resting energy requirements. So it's the energy required for body maintenance at rest. If we take a closer look at adults, we can see that their daily energy requirement is between 1.2 to 1.6 times their resting energy requirements. Kittens, on the other hand, have a much higher requirement of 2.5 times their RER. And then if we look at lactation in particular, we can see that there's a huge demand for energy during the lactation period, with it being 2 to 6 times their RER, and we'll be talking about lactation later. Most of the body is made up of water, and if we look at the percentage body weight of neonates compared to adult cats that's made up of water, we can see that neonates have a much higher percentage body weight, which is made up of water. It's around the 80 plus mark. But as they grow and mature, the percentage body weight, which consists of water, decreases, such that as an adult, it accounts for approximately 60% of their body weight. Subsequently, it's incredibly important to ensure that they remain hydrated, with obviously their water being attained from the queen's milk. If they become dehydrated, again, it can become a life-threatening issue. Just like many of their organs, the digestive system of neonates is very rudimentary and still developing. And as time progresses, we see changes in digestive enzyme activity, which is illustrated in the graph on the screen. If we look at the age and their ability to digest both lactose and their ability to digest starch, we can see that at approximately 3 weeks of age, their lactose digestive capabilities start decreasing, meaning it becomes progressively more difficult to digest milk. At the same time, from 3 weeks onwards, we can see that their starch digestive capacity increases, although it's still very limited up until the kind of 6 to 8 week mark of age, and then it continues to increase. So we've talked about some of the sensitivities and issues that neonates face early within the piece. So obviously maintaining blood glucose, having enough energy, maintaining their body temperature, etc. And so now what we're going to do is take a look at colostrum and lactation, because as you all know, neonates rely solely on nutrition provided by the queen. So let's jump into it and take a look at this. Lactation is a defining feature of all mammals. The milk and also the colostrum will be the only nutritional source for neonates during the first few weeks of life. And this life-sustaining liquid provides water, nutrients such as fats, proteins, etc., but it also has an immune function in the form of antibodies as well. And we'll concentrate on the immune system and why colostrum is important in just a little while. In queens, the mammary glands consist of 4 pairs, unlike the dog, which typically has 5 pairs. Those glands contain functional units called glandular cells, and these are in groups, and one group is called a lobule. And then the milk is expelled through a canal and an orifice. Behind all of this is the hormonal regulation of lactation, which in itself is very complex. To sum it up briefly, we can say that the start signal for lactation is a physical stimulus on the mammary gland, which stimulates prolactin, which then stimulates milk production, and oxytocin, which stimulates muscle contractions. We do know that if there is an absence or a prolonged absence of suckling, this can decrease the milk production. Other hormones also play a role, such as cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And stress may cause significant levels of cortisol, which is known to have a potential to stop lactation, resulting in immunosuppression, etc. It's important that you make sure that the environment that your queen and your neonates are in is as stress-free as possible. What about energy and the queen? Well, weight gain is critical for pregnant queens in order to have normal lactation. Fat will start to be stored from conception onwards, and the main aim is to have a weight gain of around 30 to 40% of her initial weight prior to queening. We try to avoid weight gain greater than 45% and less than 30%. And the reasons for this is less than 30%, then the required energy for lactation isn't potentially going to be there. And greater than 45%, there's an increased risk of obesity, but also laying fat down into the myometrium, which is the muscle layers of the uterus, and it may cause uterine issues at the time of birth. So thinking about lactation, how much milk do you think a queen can actually produce in a day? Is it 120 mil, 150 mil, 220 mil, or 250 mil? Well, it might surprise you, but queens can produce up to 250 mil per day. Hence, it's really important that we provide the right nutrition for them to make sure that they have adequate fat stores in order to produce the milk that they're required to feed to their neonates and kittens. To give you some figures, the quantity of milk produced by a queen can be up to 250 mil, as I mentioned just a minute ago. And interestingly, when we compare the milk of cats to dogs, there's little variation in the nutrients for the first 4 weeks, which is unlike dogs, which have a lot of variation. Lactation peaks at around 3 weeks after delivery. So at this period, the energy requirements will be the highest for the queens. There are a number of factors which may affect lactation, including nutrition, the number of neonates, so do they have one or two, or have they got quite a number of them, the health of the mammary glands, is there infection present, etc., the breed, but also the body condition. Normally, you'll be monitoring the daily weight gain of neonates and kittens, as the first symptom of neonatal disease is typically a decrease in weight. Normal weight gain equals about 10 to 15 grams per day in kittens. Frequently, it is associated with other symptoms like constant crying or extreme inactivity, and we generally recommend that you should be weighing your neonates and kittens for the first 2 weeks of their life. You're all familiar with colostrum, so immediately after birth, neonates enter a non-sterile environment. At the same time, nutrients are no longer supplied by the placenta and energy requirements are really high. Infectious diseases are recognized as the most frequent cause of neonatal mortality in kittens. Immunity and energy are closely linked in neonates, and those suffering from hypothermia or hypoglycemia are predisposed to septicemia. Both immunity and energy is supplied to neonates via a very specific mammary secretion, colostrum. Colostrum is a viscous, sticky, yellowish coloured fluid, and the yellow colour comes from the high antibody level, and it's produced for the first 24 to 48 hours following birth. Several types of antibodies are in colostrum, but not all of them are absorbed. Some of them have a local role, immune role within the gut of the neonate, while immunoglobulin G is well absorbed during the first 48 hours of life. Colostrum's not milk, and milk is not colostrum, so it's vital that all kittens do get colostrum. This table highlights the difference in nutrient levels between colostrum and milk. Notably, you'll see that the protein and energy levels of colostrum are higher of that when compared to that of milk, whereas milk has higher levels of calcium and phosphorus when compared to colostrum. And the reason for this is that obviously phosphorus and calcium will be required for healthy bone development. So we've established that neonates are susceptible to infections, but why is this? Well, firstly, the placenta prevents the transfer of antibodies from the mother's blood to the neonate. Secondly, the immune system of the neonate is yet to develop. And so the combination of these two things means that neonates are very susceptible to infection. And as I mentioned, colostrum plays a large role in ensuring that basically they get that initial protection. And hence why it's super important that we ensure that all kittens do get colostrum. As I mentioned before, the placenta prevents immunity from being transferred from the queen to the developing fetuses during gestation. Thus, kittens do acquire their initial immunity passively via the colostrum they receive. And there are three main types of antibodies. I briefly mentioned them before. The predominant antibody is IgG. It accounts for about 96%, which predominantly originates from the queen's blood and then gets transferred into the colostrum. And this antibody is responsible for both systemic and local immunity. IgA and IgM are two other antibodies, but these are produced in the mammary gland itself and when ingested have a local role within the gut of the neonate. So there's a concept called the immunity gap. And this graph illustrates immunity in neonates and kittens over time. So initially, immunity is provided by the maternal antibodies, as we talked about. These gradually decline with time as the kitten's own immune system progressively increases. So we can see here the red part of the graph illustrates the decrease in maternal antibodies with time. The kitten's own antibodies are developing with time, which is illustrated by the green. And here we can see a red line in the middle, which is the minimum protection level. You can see that from 3 to 12 weeks, there's this white area on the graph. And this is what we refer to as the immunity gap. This is where the maternal antibodies and the kitten's own antibodies fall below the minimum protection level, thus meaning that they're more susceptible to disease. And the take-home message from this is that you'll see that the immunity gap occurs when weaning occurs, when they typically go to their new home, when they're receiving vaccinations, etc. And so it's a really important concept when we talk about immunity in kittens in illustrating why we do see essentially disease within this period. So we've established that colostrum plays a vital role to provide immune protection. This protection is common for a whole host of different infectious diseases, and I'm sure you've all been familiar with these, such as herpes virus, calicivirus, leukemia virus, as well as feline infectious enteritis. And you can see over to the right here the length of colostral protection. So again, this highlights the importance of kittens getting adequate levels of colostrum to confer that protection from the queen. Then with time, as illustrated by the immunity gap graph, we know that the kittens will develop their own immune system, and we also do vaccinations during that immunity gap to stimulate their immune system to develop protection against these diseases. What if we look at the morbidity rate during this period? That is the rate at which neonates and kittens become unwell. Well, there's two susceptibility peaks. The first one that we see occurs within the first 15 days, and then just after birth being the most common period. And common causes of morbidity during this period include inadequate colostrum uptake, but also infections as well. This is then followed by a peri-weaning period, which coincides with the immunity gap. This morbidity peak extends from 5 weeks to 12 weeks, with infection and parasites being the most common causes of morbidity, so then becoming unwell. And there were two interesting studies conducted in the UK and in France independently, which showed that the mortality rate is around 15% between birth and 8 weeks of age. And breed impact is very important, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And an example of this is Persians or Siamese have a higher mortality rate compared to Obsidians or Burmans. It was interesting because, as I said, that the mortality rate is roughly about 15%, and you can see in the United Kingdom it was 83.7% of 8-week-old kittens alive, and 85% in France of kittens were alive at 8 weeks of age. So when it comes to mortality in neonates, breed definitely plays a role. In this graph, it demonstrates the percentage, in this table, it demonstrates the percentage of stillbirths. And basically the highest is in exotic shorthairs, followed by the Persian. If we look at the mortality rate in the first 7 days of life, it is highest in the Persian. And the percentage mortalities between 1 to 8 weeks of age is highest in the exotic shorthair. So we do know that some breeds breed certainly does play a role in mortality. So let's branch out now, seeing as we've talked about the sensitivities that can affect neonates, but also a little bit about colostrum and lactation. So let's talk about now nutrition. And as I've mentioned over and over, neonates rely solely on nutrition provided by the queen. So there's 6 key nutrient groups, and these are proteins, carbohydrates, fats, minerals, and water. And they all have specific roles within the body, and it's really important that we do provide the correct nutrition that matches life stage, lifestyle, reproductive status, etc. And some nutrients are considered essential nutrients. That is, nutrients that must be attained from their diet. An example of this is taurine. Taurine is important for reproductive, cardiovascular function, eye health, and also has an antioxidant effect. And we know that cats need to get taurine from meat, unlike dogs and humans that can basically form taurine from other nutrients. When we think about nutrition, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's important to remember that the nutritional requirements for a kitten are not the same as those required for an adult cat. And this is why we recommend specific nutrition for growth up until 12 months of age. And an example of this, and there's plenty of them, is calcium. So thinking about the amount of calcium required by a kitten, is it the same as an adult? Is it twice the adult requirement? Is it 3 times the adult requirement? Or is it 4 times the adult requirement? And the correct answer here is 3 times the adult requirement. And as you're all aware, calcium is vital for normal bone growth and development. So when we look at the growth of kittens, we know that there's basically a certain pattern that they follow, and we can split kitten growth into 2 stages. Stage 1, or first stage kitten, this is the period of birth from birth until 4 months of age. And in this stage, we see intense and rapid growth. We then have the second stage, or second age kitten. And in this period, it corresponds from the 4-month mark up until the 12-month mark. And this is where we see slower growth, we see consolidation, etc. And majority of kittens will typically be fully grown by 12 months. This will vary with some of the larger breeds that are out there. So during the first 4 months of life, what are the main issues that nutrition needs to help address during this period? Well, firstly, we've established that there's an immunity gap, and this is of significant importance. Secondly, the digestive system is developing, so we need to ensure we support digestive health and development. And thirdly, we need to ensure that there is an appropriate transition from milk to solid food, and that it meets all of their nutritional requirements. So the key features of all of our starter diets are the inclusion of highly digestible proteins. Basically, we want as much of the protein in which they ingest to be absorbed by the body and utilized by the body. They've got higher levels of energy because growth requires energy. Our diets help to support the immune system development due to the inclusion of vitamin C, vitamin E, lutein, and taurine. And they help to support the digestive system, and this is both in its development and health, due to, again, the presence of highly digestible proteins, but also the prebiotics FOS and MOS, and an adapted fiber level. All of our diets are complete and balanced. So I just mentioned prebiotics. A lot of people think about prebiotics as being probiotics. They're completely separate and different. And so probiotics are the bacteria themselves, whereas prebiotics are essentially the food that we give to the good bacteria that are in the gut. And there's two types of prebiotics. There's FOS and MOS. So FOS, also known as fructooligosaccharides, provides an essential food source for the friendly bacteria within the gut. And they help to basically inhibit the growth of nasty bacteria. Another benefit of FOS is that it helps to reduce fecal odor. And this video highlights what it does. So we have healthy bacteria in green, unhealthy bacteria in red. FOS feeds the friendlies, as I like to say. And if the friendly bacteria are happy and they're being fed, they'll basically replicate, and we'll get more and more of them outgrowing the bad bacteria within the gut. MOS, on the other hand, is mannane oligosaccharides, and this is derived from the cell walls of yeast, and these help to prevent bad bacteria from basically adhering to the intestinal walls. So again, the bad guys are in red, the good guys are in green. Essentially, MOS will come along, it binds to the bad bacteria, it prevents their attachment to the gut wall, and they get passed out in the feces. And with the presence of FOS there, the FOS feeds the friendly bacteria, so we get more and more of these to create a healthy microbial population within the gut. And we know that this is vital from multiple perspectives of health, particularly when it comes to the immune system. So Royal Canin diets are based on extensive scientific research and development. In the Royal Canin kitten range, we have both dry food, mousse, and pouch options which are available. So this slide I've included to illustrate the different diets and how they're recommended to be used. At weaning, it's recommended to use mother and baby cat mousse, which is highly aromatic and palatable. It has an ultra soft texture specifically designed for weaning, and it's one of my favorite products. In conjunction with this, or by itself, the next diet to use is the mother and baby cat kibble. A key feature of this is that it's rehydratable and the consistency can be altered depending on the amount of water added. As they continue to grow and develop, the neonates are able to handle different textures and densities. So we have kitten in gravy, kitten in jelly, and kitten loaf available in pouches. And we also have the kitten dry available. So Royal Canin mother and baby cat comes in both a kibble and a mousse, and it can be used from 1 month of age in kittens, as well as in gestating and nursing queens. It's been specifically formulated to help support the immune system of both kittens and queens due to an antioxidant complex. When it comes to supporting digestive health, it contains highly digestible proteins, which makes it easier for them to be digested, absorbed, and utilized. It also contains FOS, and as we mentioned before, this helps to feed the healthy bacteria and inhibit nasty bacteria, as well as reduce fecal odor. It's also enriched with DHA, and this helps to support the cognitive development of kittens. So with the mother and baby cat kibble, it can be rehydrated to create a soft texture, which is easily able to be chewed. It can also be combined with the baby cat mousse to achieve a different consistency, which may be preferred by some kittens. And instructions for all of these are able to be found online as well as on the packaging. Our kitten pouches can be fed up to 12 months of age, and there's 3 different types. We have kitten thin slices in gravy, kitten small chunks in jelly, and we have kitten loaf. And so these all provide immune system support, Again, they're designed for easy chewing, and they have different aromatic profiles and textures to basically be tailored to the preference of the kitten. With our Royal Canin kitten diet, this is designed to be fed from 4 months of age until 1 year. This diet, like the mother and baby cat diet, has specific nutrients to support the growing body. For digestive health, this includes highly digestible proteins, an adapted fiber content, and as we talked about before, prebiotics. When it comes to supporting the immune system, it does have vitamin C, vitamin E, lutein, and taurine as part of our antioxidant complex. And it has an adapted energy content that provides the required energy for normal growth and development. So all in all, we can see that this is a vital period in the life of a kitten, and it's important that we do everything that we can to ensure the correct nutrition for a queen, pregnant queen, to make sure that when she is about to give birth, she's in the right condition, that we ensure that we provide the right environment for her and her neonates, and that we basically have touched upon the nutritional requirements of all and some of the sensitivities that are faced by neonates in that early part of their life. So tonight's presentation is a nice and short one. I'll just have a look to see if we've got any questions. If you do have any questions, there is a question box on your screen that you can put any questions there, and I will be able to answer them. This presentation also will be recorded and added to our Royal Canin Breeder Facebook page. So if there's anything in particular within the presentation that you would like to refresh yourself on, you will be able to go through that again. And as always, if you do have any questions regarding our products, obviously feel free to contact our Pro customer service team at any point for advice. So at this stage, there doesn't appear to be any questions. So I might leave it there. But if you do have any questions or think of anything, feel free to go to our Facebook page and I'll be happy to answer them there. Well, thank you for joining us. And in future, we do plan on having more feline-based webinars. So if you've got any particular topics you'd like to be covered, again, feel free to get in contact with us so that we can create some webinars that you might find are of value. Well, thank you once again for joining me and have a lovely evening. Thank you.